welcome back to the GC channel. I'm your host, Orlando Casares, the president and founder of British Law International. If you're new with us, welcome. This is a channel especially for you, for the GCs and for in-house legal teams, and it's powered by general counsels. We'll be covering today some of the trendiest topics, things that keep you up at night, and we hope that you will find the next few minutes invaluable and very insightful. So follow us along. Let's look at the rhetoric, at the narrative that is coming out of Downing. Let's look at what the London City Business District is saying, right? So what is the chattering on the streets? And then some of the spokesmen of government saying, well, you know, this is the year. This is the year for us to encourage more technology, for our IT companies to go public. I mean, there's even encouragement to really not only take a leap of faith, but to go big. That's going to require a partnership, right? There is a lot of talk about improving the visa requirements to allow, you know, skillful workforce to return to the UK. And even more recently, there is all that talk about green growth. So you're right. These are areas that are in vogue, that are trending. The question is, and maybe this is more for Bruce, from a commercial corporate entity. Let's just use a U.S. multinational with presence in the U.K. and he's kind of, you know, he has an office somewhere in the city and he's scratching his head and he's saying, you know, the cost of sort of regularizing and updating my agreements to implement changes, the unknown, the cost, the rising cost of corporate tax, whatever the case may be, is a corporate client, a big multinational company, going to say, you know what? It's just too uncertain. Let's just migrate to the Netherlands or Paris or Berlin or whatever. Or do you say to them, no, that's understandable. It's early day jitters, but look at the mid to long-term range. What would you counsel those clients that are uncertain right now?
I think it's the second very much for a couple of reasons. The new framework that we've got with the TCA definitely does make some things more difficult, more expensive, some transitorily, some enduringly. However, it does create other opportunities, some of which are starting to emerge both within the European framework and also internationally with the new trading agreements that have been arranged. But I think the way I would look at it from a UK perspective is twofold. First, as Sean's touched on, the UK in its own right is still a very substantial market and a growing one. And we have an incumbent government with a large majority and an increasingly clear general direction of travel about how it's going to invest in the UK, in technology, in environmental, in electric vehicle propulsion, in the creation of special trading zones called free ports, in levelling up, as it calls it, certain parts of the industrial heartland of the country by fresh investment in infrastructure and other things. So you have a strong government with a clear majority in several years to run to develop that investment environment, and quite a lot of the investments they put in train, such as free port development, will succeed beyond the term of the current government, regardless of whether it's elected a second time or not. So it gives you a predictability below the noise about what to look at as focal investment points for the UK domestic market, which is substantial. But also it ties into that international agenda, because if there's one thing that's clear about the Johnson administration is its desire to show that separating from Europe can put it into a global leadership role, hence the COP comments, hence the Cornish G7 meeting and so on. Being half Cornish, I'm hoping it does give that part of our country a good economic boost because it needs it. But the thing with this is that when you are building international consensus and international approaches, you can only lead if others follow with you. And that means that while you have the right to diverge on regulation from Europe, if not necessarily under World Trade Organization rules and other things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will diverge significantly, because you need to take people with you. And so I think that the thing to look at carefully with these agendas is to say, where is there common interest in the UK exercising its newfound sovereignty to do the same thing as other people, but from a leadership position? Therefore, you don't have duplication of standards, duplication of regulation, different tariff models. And therefore, the UK as a committed investor into these areas and a committed long-term view will be as good a place as anywhere else from a regulatory point of view internationally to do it, but actually may have investment in other reasons why you may find it incentivized more to be here than elsewhere. So I'm speaking from London today. So I think in that context is look below the trough, look at the direction of travel, and accept that there are things which are going to be more difficult and more expensive, but there are other things where, you know, any good strategic advisor, which is what a general counsel, the general bit of counselling should be doing, will be saying, let's look at where there's opportunity been opened up and where, while we can't guarantee stability on these things, we can see a high level of probability that these will be trends that will run, and we can take an informed business risk on investing in them. And yeah, the sensible money is often the leading edge, but not bleeding edge investor. And so being leading edge on this stuff will hopefully give an advanced level of ability to build and develop in the market.
You know, it's very insightful that you went into that direction, because this kind of ties into the next question. You know, the pundits, the doomsdayers, or those that are still unconvinced, they're putting a lot of weight on the forecast of the upcoming corporate tax hike. But if truth be told, and Sean, you can weigh into this, even with a higher corporate rate, it'd still be a very competitive rate considering the G7 or the G8 position. So it's maybe that the UK was too good too long, and now it's going to catch up with the other big players in terms of corporate tax. But is that in and of itself, because that's what the pundits are saying, oh my gosh, it's going to be too expensive to work there. Because Bruce just talked about the other things, you know, all the other things that were omitted in the TCA, perhaps on purpose, or perhaps we just ran out of time, they will get sorted out, you know, corporate law and travel and judicial review, all that. But for the business community, going from 19 to 25 is a bitter pill to swallow. Sean, is that enough to detract the excitement and optimism? Or is that just, hey, it's the cost of doing business in a global, soon to be an equal partner worldwide?
It's interesting when the Chancellor announced the hike, and you know, I've been with the CBI for many years, and any hike in corporation tax usually is met with a very sharp intake of breath. This time, the intake wasn't just as sharp, because I think there is a realization, particularly given what economies have gone through in this past 12 months with the pandemic, that what has been done, and particularly in furlough schemes and support schemes, they have to be paid for, and therefore they have to be paid for, through taxes. So businesses will want to play its part, given that they did receive support throughout that kept them afloat throughout this period, and you know, the CBI had its hands. In fact, when you look at the furlough scheme that was introduced in the UK, it was practically the CBI that wrote it and submitted it. I mean, a few tweaks here and there, but it is something. And so businesses are understanding. I think there is probably one challenge, and we might come on to it later. It's the situation of Northern Ireland, because when you have a situation of high tax over 20% for the whole of the UK, and your neighbour south of the border has something around 12.5. If you were an American or a kind of international investor wanting to invest in Ireland, you would look at that 12% and almost double across a border. So, you know, while the TCA and the withdrawal agreement and the protocol is supposed to protect certain elements for the Northern Ireland citizen and the economy, you know, having a kind of corporation tax rate that is not competitive with its neighbour will pose challenges. So I think we want to look at this, see how it's done in practice. But there was not the usual sharp, and I'm of a view that others will follow around the world in raising corporation tax. We've seen even what has come out of the current US administration. So I think maybe the UK moved first on this, but I would expect that others will have to move in order to pay for what has happened over this past 12 months and will continue to happen over the coming months, because there is a point, and we are involved in the G7. We had a B7 summit last week, and one of the key messages there is that we want to return to a normal economy and weaning ourselves off the private sector, off public money, and that is a commitment. And in order to do that, we might have to have higher taxes somewhere else. But all these things should be looked in a package, not just you do corporation tax. Where else can you make tax cuts, incentives, etc.?
And I think that was the follow-up question to that one is maybe nobody likes a tax hike, but everybody likes it even less during a pandemic. So it's like a perfect storm. I can't go back to normal, and now I have to weather a higher tax. But would it be fair to say, because I think one of the headlines from the City UK folks, that they were talking about the fact that this hike in tax typically will follow a sort of a matched commitment to streamline and simplify the tax code so that you could try to offset the very red, 19 to 25% tax, which is going to look awful, especially when you mention Northern Ireland. But in fact, if there's other caveats in the tax code that can ease the burden, at the end of the day, net, maybe you're only going up a point or two, and then you still have all the other benefits that the UK would offer. Is that a fair comment, or are we dreaming a little bit?
I think that's fair. And I think, as Bruce said, you've got a kind of vision from this government, and particularly around the levelling up agenda and their emphasis on infrastructure and infrastructure builds and the capacity is how do you kind of incentivize greater investment into infrastructure, whether it's green or digital or whether modal, that is where you expect government to place the emphasis. Yes, we will place the tax, but we will make it a much more conducive environment in which to invest. So I think you're right. But again, there are certain things that we don't like everything that the government has proposed. I mean, one of the big issues that many of our members are, and it's quite a domestic one, is around business rates, and we would like to see a reform on that. And so there are other elements, and how and it's still early days with the Queen's speech. I think last week as well, there were a lot of bills in it, and what is the state aid regime? What are the new kind of structures that will be set up? So there are. I think tax is one thing. The biggest thing, and Bruce alluded to this as well, one of the things that businesses find more challenging than tax is the regulatory costs. And let's be careful that we don't regulate too quickly just to show that we are removed from the shackles of Brussels and we're doing something different. But actually, it creates more costs for business and not as we simplify or be done in a way that is better regulation. So I think that's the message. Tax is one thing, but for businesses, the regulatory costs can sometimes be bigger.
Well, thank you for watching. If you would like to see more videos like this one, subscribe to the channel and press the notification button below so that you will be alerted when new videos come out. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to the next one. And don't forget, you heard it here first.